All right, I think we're live. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's nice to see you all. I can't see you. Thanks for coming in this Thursday. We have so much to talk about. I have Den, who is helping out in the comments, and he is moderating everything. So if you have any questions in the YouTube live stream, leave them, and we will make sure I see them. You can always support this show by going to patreon.com/Hemant. I appreciate that. And you can always subscribe to the newsletter by going to friendlyatheist.com. You could do that for free if you want. I appreciate that as well. I will tell you, happy Twitter was awesome day today. I made the mistake of scheduling some meetings smack dab in the middle of the afternoon, and I just finished them like 5 minutes ago before I was prepping for this. And so I've been rummaging and scrolling like crazy, trying to follow whatever the hell Elon and Trump are up to. But, you know, let the sisters fight. And I hope they both lose. I did enjoy the tweet that basically said this is like Kendrick versus Drake, but both sides are Drake. So fantastic. Let them fight. I hope Elon realizes he has enough money to really destroy all of the Republican Party if he wanted to. I don't think he's going to get there, but whatever. Okay, let's talk about regular stories. And we could talk about Elon during the first break, I guess. The first thing I wanted to talk about tonight is that the Supreme Court today issued a decision that is bad. It's not as bad as it could be, but it is bad. And, you know, when I was scrolling through the news today, this is the case that did not get as much media attention as some of the other things they decided today. So I wanted to kind of talk about what this case is about and what the Supreme Court just ruled. And so let me back up just a little bit, because this is all about a group called Catholic Charities and whether or not they're eligible for a certain tax break. So let me back up for a second. And I know I made a video about this months and months ago, but it's been a while. So maybe you don't know. So there's a law called the Wisconsin Unemployment Compensation Act. And basically what it means is if you are an employer in the state of Wisconsin, you have to give some money to the government in taxes to help pay for eligible citizens to get temporary benefits when they're out of work. So all employers have to pay into the system. But in 1972, religious nonprofits were declared exempt from that law. Specifically, the law said that nonprofits that are run by a church or ministry and that operate, and this is important, primarily for religious purposes, do not have to pay into the system. Now, in 2023, a court basically ruled that the Catholic Charities Bureau, along with 4 of its subgroups, they are not eligible for that exemption. Like, everyone knows they are run by the Catholic Diocese of Superior, but there was disagreement over whether their work was religious in nature. For example, groups that were aligned with the Catholic Charities, they do things like job placement and food services and helping people with developmental disabilities. And those are all wonderful things, and I appreciate that they're doing it. And the CCB, Catholic Charities Bureau, they said that their goal was to help the poor and the disadvantaged, and they said this is an extension of our faith. But the thing about that is that helping the poor and the disadvantaged is not inherently a religious thing. Secular people do that too, right? So just because those groups are overseen by the Catholic Church, it doesn't necessarily mean they are there to advance Catholicism. Like, they're not actively promoting their faith. They're not directly promoting it. They're not proselytizing. You don't have to be a Catholic to work for them. You don't have to be a Catholic to receive the benefits of the work they are doing. So the question is, do they deserve a tax exemption that's meant to benefit religious organizations when the work that they are doing is pretty much secular? I mean, it's good work that they're doing, but it is secular. So for decades, the Catholic Charities Bureau paid the unemployment taxes because they said the work we do is not religious. It's charitable, it's educational, it's rehabilitative, but it's not religious, right? But in 2015, they said, you know, we could save some money if we apply for this tax break. So they applied for it and they got rejected. And over the next several years, that decision was reversed and then reversed again. And in courts, they would have a ruling that goes their way and then the other. And so anyway, this gets up to the Wisconsin Supreme Court last year. This is the Wisconsin Supreme Court that's had some huge battles over Supreme Court justices. Like the Democrats were facing off against the Republicans, and they got a lot of money because people wanted the Democrats to win. So the Democrats had a 4-3 liberal edge on that state Supreme Court. Well, the Wisconsin Supreme Court heard this case last year, and they arrived at the same conclusion that I just told you, which is that you can't just look at the top of the pyramid and see the Catholic Church at the top and say everything under them is now a religious organization, even when they're not. So they looked at the group's activities, not what their claimed motivations are. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court said when you look at their activities, what they're doing is pretty secular. This is actually what they said. Let me show you this. Here we go. This is what the Wisconsin Supreme Court said. You could see it in the top line. The record demonstrates that Catholic Charities Bureau and the subgroups, the sub-entities, which are organized as separate corporations apart from the church itself, neither attempt to imbue program participants with the Catholic faith, nor supply any religious materials to program participants or employees. Although not required, those would tell us that you're doing something religious. So basically, they said, you're not doing anything Catholic-y, right? Everything you're doing, they said, is a wholly secular endeavor. The things you are doing could be done by a secular group the exact same way. The services provided would not differ in any sense. So we conclude that what you are doing is not religious in nature, no matter what you say to the contrary. So there might have been a different outcome if the Catholic Church was running these organizations, but they were not. These are smaller subgroups that do their own thing. They have their own taxes. You know what I mean? The Catholic Church just oversaw it at arm's length. So in Wisconsin, what that meant is charities would have to do a lot more than just like point to a cross to prove they deserve a faith-based exemption under the law, right? So this is a far cry from the U.S. Supreme Court saying Hobby Lobby is Christian because its owners are Christian or something. And you could imagine, and this is important too, imagine what would have happened if the Wisconsin Supreme Court said, yeah, okay, we'll count them as a religious group. Because if they do that, what about like Marquette University or any Catholic-owned hospital that's not necessarily Catholic, but they're owned by the church? Do those employers, which employ a ton of people in the state of Wisconsin, if Catholic colleges and universities that employ a lot of people across the state, if they say, oh, yeah, we're totally Catholic, so we don't have to pay unemployment taxes either, that would be devastating to that entire program. So should they be allowed to get away with it just because they claim to have an affiliation with the Catholic Church? And if you needed any more proof that this group was really trying, like the Catholic side was really trying to push religion, just look at this argument made by one of the dissenting judges in Wisconsin, Rebecca Bradley. She opened up her dissent by quoting the Bible, as if to really say, you guys, everything these groups are doing is religious. I don't know why you open up a secular legal opinion with the Bible verse unless you want nobody to take you seriously. It's a weird move on her part. So after all of this, that judge I just showed you, the dissenting judge, she said the liberal majority, they were impermissibly entangling the government in the church doctrine. Like as if the government was getting involved with state, as opposed to just saying, doesn't look like there's any church issue over here, right? So and by the way, she said it's unfair that the government is mingling with the church when she's citing a Bible verse to open up her dissent. Utterly crazy. So here's the thing. The right-wing legal groups, they asked the Supreme Court to jump in. They wanted the U.S. Supreme Court to jump in and overturn this ruling because they want Catholic groups or any groups affiliated that say they're affiliated with the Catholic Church to get out of paying taxes. And they're basically arguing that, hey, Supreme Court, we need you to overturn this decision because screwing over the unemployed is also a part of the Catholic faith. I mean, it would negate any goodwill they may have preserved by focusing on helping the less fortunate. But last year, the Supreme Court said, yeah, we're going to hear this case. And earlier this year, they did hear oral arguments in this case. And that was scary because it didn't look great. But the question that people had after the oral arguments is, what is this court going to do? We know it's 6-3 conservative supermajority. Are they going to issue a very narrow ruling that applies just to Wisconsin? Or are they going to use this to say, any group that claims it's religious doesn't have to pay any sort of taxes? Like, how broad are they going to go? And it's scary to think about what they could do with this case. And you can imagine if they overturned the decision, how many charities are going to just race to say, oh, yeah, we're totally affiliated with the church now, so I guess we don't have to pay taxes in our state either. That would be scary. So what happened today? Today, the Supreme Court decided to weigh in. They issued their ruling today, and it was 9-0. All the justices said we are overturning the Wisconsin Supreme Court decision. They said Wisconsin went too far in denying the tax break to the Catholic group. So by punishing Catholic charities for not proselytizing, the justices wrote, they were helping certain groups. Let me show you what Sonia Sotomayor wrote. She was the judge who wrote the decision here. And you would think if Sotomayor, one of the liberal judges, is writing this decision, that's probably a good sign. Well, let me show you what she wrote here, because this is how she parsed this difference. Wisconsin's exemption, as interpreted by its Supreme Court, thus grants a denominational preference. And what she's basically saying is Wisconsin Supreme Court said, if you proselytize while you help the homeless, if you proselytize, if you force Catholicism upon them, then you would count as religious. You would not have to pay the unemployment taxes. But this group, they did not proselytize. Therefore, you are punishing them for their what they claim is their religious affiliation. Even though they are just acting out their beliefs, you're punishing one group in a way you would not punish the other group. So what she says is, indeed, petitioners' eligibility for the exemption ultimately turns on inherently religious choices, namely whether to proselytize or serve only other Catholics, not secular criteria. So she's saying that's a Catholic group right there. They say they're Catholic. They're doing the work they are wanting to do, be inspired by their Catholic faith. You can't punish them for that and pretend they're not Catholic. And so because of that, she's basically saying the Wisconsin Supreme Court is treating this group differently because of the way they are practicing their religious beliefs. Sotomayor also said this at the very bottom of that page I was showing you. Much like a law exempting only those religious organizations that perform baptisms or worship on Sundays, an exemption that requires proselytization or exclusive service of other Catholics in this case establishes a preference for certain religions based on the commands of their religious doctrine. So she also said, I should point this out because this was a pretty strong message from her. This is the very end of her decision. It is fundamental to our constitutional order that the government maintain neutrality between religion and religion. You can't treat one better than the other. There may be hard calls to make in policing that rule, but this is not one. So she very firmly agrees that Wisconsin was wrong when they denied a tax break to this charity. So what do we do with that? Here's my takeaway, and it's only been one day here, but first, the fact that Sotomayor wrote this decision for the court, that's good compared to if, Sam Alito wrote it. She also crafted a very narrow win for Catholic charities. At the end of the day, Catholic charities will get the tax exemption they were seeking. But here's the question that I've been trying to get an answer to all day. Where do other groups go from here? How are they going to use this decision to benefit themselves? Because Sotomayor's ruling requires all of these groups that get a tax exemption to have at least some formal religious connection to some religious group. So it's good news for Catholic charities. It is disturbing news for everybody else because the fact that could now open the door to other groups with loose religious ties. That's scary because it means they could start asking for tax breaks as well. So now I go back to a point I raised earlier. What about universities or hospitals that say they are affiliated with a religious organization? In Wisconsin, those are some of the biggest employers in the state. Are they now going to ask for a tax break saying we don't have to pay unemployment taxes? Because that would be bad news. And I don't know if they're going to do that. What happens in other states that have similar laws that say they want a tax break? I don't know either. Now, a lot of groups have weighed in on this. The Freedom from Religion Foundation, they said we're worried about the slippery slope. They said in a press release, hundreds of thousands of employees, including those at Catholic-affiliated hospitals, could potentially lose the benefit of unemployment insurance. And that's scary. They actually pointed out that half of the 10 largest Catholic health systems in the United States could now potentially claim exemptions from unemployment insurance. That would be disturbing. Americans United for Separation of Church and State said that this ruling favors the purported religion of companies and organizations over protections for individual workers. The American Humanist Association said the ruling broadens the realm of what conduct is considered religious practice and invites allegations of discrimination into any effort to regulate religiously adjacent conduct. And here's the thing, I read through all those statements after the ruling came out. None of them are actually saying what's going to happen because they don't know. That's not a knock on them. Frankly, no one knows what's going to happen because we don't know how this decision is going to be used to further destroy the social safety net. But given the sort of people who are celebrating this decision, you have to think that destruction is kind of guaranteed. I just don't know how they're going to do it. So it's a narrow ruling, could have been much worse, but we don't really know how right-wing groups are going to use this decision to get out of paying taxes if they believe, oh, our religion gives us a get out of paying taxes free card. And how many other states are going to try to do something with this? We don't know yet. So it's a bad decision. It's an unfortunate ruling, even if you think maybe there's some merit there. Like, the bottom line is a Catholic group fought to get out of helping people who need unemployment benefits, and they won because they're Catholic. And that should disturb everybody. I don't know why religious groups should be exempt from paying unemployment benefits when they benefit from that system, because we're all better. Rising tide lifts all boats, right? So disturbing ruling, but I wanted to put that out there. I'm going to pause here for some questions before I move on to a different story. What do we got? I appreciate the donation. I have yet to toss a donation your way. I often enjoy listening while I do other stuff, so this is a belated thank you. Thanks, one-eyed heathen. I appreciate that. A holy secular endeavor. You know what? When I said that, when the Wisconsin Supreme Court said what the charities are doing is a holy secular endeavor, WHOLLY, an entirely secular endeavor. Sorry about that. My bad. I might be wrong in thinking this, but I fear if we broadly tax churches, then they will demand formal representation in government. That's my concern. You know, I've said this before, but I don't think we should tax churches because I don't think we should tax nonprofit organizations. I think it's good that nonprofits, which in theory are supposed to help the community doing work that for-profit companies are never going to do, we want to reward them. We want them to do more of it. So we want them to not have to pay taxes, and we want people donating to them to be able to write off those donations on their taxes. But if we're going to apply that to nonprofit groups, the same rules should apply to churches as well, which means every nonprofit should have to file the same paperwork that says this is how much money we took in. This is where it's going. The ACLU has to do that. Churches do not. And I don't know why churches are allowed to get this better treatment, this less transparent treatment, that they should not be able to do. So I don't want to tax churches, but I do want them treated the same as other nonprofits. Sotomayor wrote the main opinion. It's just a cluster. I really don't think the court is thinking this through, creating basic tax shelter for religious people. What I have heard from people I generally trust on these matters is right now, if you're in the 3-person liberal minority on the Supreme Court, a lot of your work is playing defense. So if Sonia Sotomayor is authoring this opinion, that's probably because it could have been much worse, but she was able to make sure the ruling was as narrow as it could have been. That's a good thing, because you hate to think what would have happened if a conservative justice got their hands on this and got to speak for the entire court, how much more they would have blown up the system. So maybe I don't like the ruling, but it's possible, and we don't know the machinations of the court, it's possible, seeing the writing on the wall that liberals were going to lose this case, Sotomayor said, all right, I agree. I will take on the writing of this decision. And what she wrote is kind of the least worst version of what it could have been. And all the other justices signed on to it. I mean, I believe Justice Clarence Thomas and Ketanji Brown Jackson issued concurrences on this thing, but they didn't go out of their way to say, like, Sotomayor's ruling was wrong. So again, it could have been worse. Maybe this is their way of avoiding, the worst that it could have been. You have to imagine if, like, Sotomayor wrote the decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, we might not be in such a bad spot. But Alito wrote it, so it was really bad. You know what I mean? I don't want to be mad at Sonia Sotomayor for this, even if I think she's wrong. Okay, I'm going to move on to a different story here. Let's talk about this one. I know you saw this. Give me a second to X out of some things here. Okay. Last week, after I did the live stream, ironically, on Friday of last week, Republican Senator Joni Ernst, she was doing a town hall meeting. A lot of Republicans have avoided these, but she decided to do one in Iowa. And she was trying to defend the bill that House Republicans passed that would blow up the deficit and take over 10 million people off of Medicaid, which is the health insurance for people who can't necessarily afford it. And it would take them off those rolls. It would impose these work requirements that a lot of people can't do. It's just a horrible bill. It gives a lot of money to the wealthy. It's exactly what you expect from Republicans. So in that town hall, someone yells out from the crowd that people will die because of this bill, which is literally true. That is how this is going to work. You take away their health care, more people are going to die. And Joni Ernst is going to get a chance to vote on this bill because it's now going through the Senate. So they were saying this because they don't want her to vote for it. And Joni Ernst responds with the soundbite that should haunt her for the rest of her career. She said, and I'm quoting here, people are not, well, we all are going to die. Like, that's what she said. And it's true. Yeah, we're all going to die. The difference is that decent Democrats want to make your life worth living and make sure you have access to free or affordable health care. Joni Ernst and the other Republicans want to make your death happen more quickly because they think you deserve it. If you don't work, if you're disabled, if you're a person of color disproportionately impacted by this stuff, or if you have some pre-existing condition, Republicans think you deserve to die sooner. And if you can't afford health care, that's on you. That's your fault. Go ahead and die. So this is exactly what Republicans have been thinking for decades. And the tone of her voice, though, if you listen to that footage, I mean, it says even more than that. It says she doesn't give a damn about her own constituents who might die sooner than they might otherwise because she personally helped kick them off Medicaid, leaving them without any sort of social safety net. Like, the implication was, yeah, sure, people will die, but also, isn't that worth it if we can help rich people become even richer? So the reason you may have heard of that comment that she made is because it actually made national news. You know, the cable channels were talking about it. In fact, the Des Moines Register, this was their headline the next day. There's Joni Ernst right there. Well, we all are going to die. Like, they're putting that in all caps on their front page with a big picture of Joni Ernst. So, like, it was getting coverage. It was getting a lot of coverage, and none of it made her look good because there's no way to spin what she said to make it sound better, right? One of her potential Democratic opponents, because she's up for re-election in 2026, one of her potential opponents said, we all don't have to die so billionaires can have a bigger tax break. Another one said, yeah, we're all going to die, but our senators should not be the ones killing us. J.D. Scholten, who is a Democrat, who may be one of the few Democrats who could actually win in Iowa, in theory, he's decided to formally announce he was challenging Joni Ernst in next year's race after he heard those comments. Now, I don't know if I necessarily believe that. I'm sure he was planning this for a while, but he decided to announce his jump into the race after she made those comments. So it turns out death panels, to quote a Republican thing, death panels are real and Republicans want to run them. So this is what Joni Ernst said. But the reason I wanted to play this for you, the next thing, is because Joni Ernst, I think, realized she made a big mistake. She should not have said that. It came off bad. So she wanted to, I'll say, apologize. She wanted to respond to what all the criticism was. I'm going to play for you the video she posted on Instagram. There were two parts to it, so there's a weird cut in the middle, but it's the same clip. I want you to know she appeared to have filmed this in a cemetery. I don't know why. I don't know who decided that would be a good move, especially when we're talking about death, but she filmed it in a cemetery. And she tried to explain herself. And I'll just go ahead and say this. It didn't work. It was a bad idea. But stick around. I'll play the video for you. Watch what she says at the very end as well.
Hello, everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely apologize for a statement that I made yesterday at my town hall. I was in the process of answering a question that had been asked by an audience member when a woman who was extremely distraught screamed out from the back corner of the auditorium, "People are going to die." And I made an incorrect assumption that everyone in the auditorium understood that, yes, we are all going to perish from this earth. So I apologize. And I'm really, really glad that I did not have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy as well. But for those that would like to see eternal and everlasting life, I encourage you to embrace my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Great. Thanks for that, I guess. I know some of you in the comments saw this too. It really, that condescending Christian fundy baby voice that Jess Piper sometimes talks about, it's so condescending. So just to run through some of this stuff, she did not address the substance of the complaint, the fact that Republicans are going to kick over 10 million people off of Medicaid. She suggested her audience is too stupid to understand how mortality works. Like, I'm sorry, I thought you guys understood how death works. Glad I didn't have to explain the tooth fairy to you. Otherwise, you'd be doubly disappointed. Like, just utter contempt for her constituents. And then at the very end of it, she makes this pitch for you to follow Jesus, like she's a podcaster trying to get you to try stamps.com. Like, first of all, why isn't she following Jesus? Because the dude from the Sermon on the Mount told us to help the least of these and the least fortunate. She's like, no, it's not about me. I need you to follow Jesus because I don't know, I'm going to take away your health care. So prayer's all you're going to have left. So screw you. I don't know. It is funny to me that she mocked one mythical being, the tooth fairy, and then in the next sentence told everyone to believe in a different one. That's hilarious. But again, she doesn't care because for conservatives like her, they always call themselves pro-life. That only applies to anything that's in a womb because as soon as you're born, they do not care about you. I know George Carlin said it. Others have too. But the point is these people do not care if you live or die. And they don't care if you live if you're living in a way they don't approve of, right? And it's very easy to tell people to worship God when Republicans like her know damn well that if her health is ever on the line, she's going to get taxpayer-funded health care, and it's going to be really good. The rest of us do not have access to that sort of health care, right? And also, this also tells you why she doesn't care about gun safety either. She doesn't do a damn thing about gun violence, and now we see why, because if we're all going to die, why bother doing anything to prevent unnecessary, needless deaths? Honestly, at this point, I'm kind of surprised more Christians are not embarrassed by how their religion can be so easily co-opted by Republicans to avoid taking any responsibility for their actions. And I know there are plenty of Christians who oppose it, but again, the majority of Christians, regardless of denomination, backed Trump in 2024. White evangelicals, 80% of them in the past 3 elections have voted for Trump. And Joni Ernst, by the way, has been mired in all sorts of scandals of her own, which I would argue are not very Christ-like. You can look up Joni Ernst scandal, see what pops up. I think the big takeaway here is that what she said is not an anomaly. She didn't make a gaffe. She didn't accidentally say this stuff. She purposely said it. She made a video of herself saying it. She posted that video, and she felt no shame in doing so, because this is what Republicans like her actually believe. Like, she's not even considered a right-wing extremist, but her views are extreme. They're just like mainstream for the Republican Party now. Just FYI, again, I mentioned this earlier, but she is up for re-election next year. And even if she decides not to run, that just means an even worse Republican will win the primary. So if this is what Iowa voters want, so be it. They might as well start digging their own graves. If they need help doing that, I'm sure Joni Ernst can point you to a nearby cemetery where you could do it yourself. Just utterly infuriating. I'll stop there for this one. What other questions we got here? It's hard to overstate how abusive her attitude is. Seriously. I mean, again, if a pastor said something like that, I might roll my eyes. Her one job is to take care of her constituents. That's why you go into public service. If you're not interested in doing that, don't go for the job. I do not understand politicians who are like, oh, these people want me to take care of them. Why? Like, go do anything else. You don't have to do this. You volunteered for this job. The Republicans are trying to out-cruel each other to get attention. They are so sick. I mean, story of the past 25 years, at least in the Republican Party. I mean, with Reagan too. But like, yeah, this is their whole history. If you're voting for Republicans, it's because you hate certain groups of people so much, and you hope Republicans in power will hurt them instead of you. And the irony of the Trump administrations, both of them, is that a lot of the stuff Trump does hurts his own voters. They all vote for him because they're like, yeah, we don't like brown people. We don't like poor people. And then Trump turns around and he's like, I'm going to hurt the farmers, and I'm going to hurt people who are here overseas. I'm going to hurt immigrant communities that voted for me too. And again, when are these people going to realize, no, you voted for the leopards eating people's faces party and now you're screwed? Audience member, how about constituent? Did I say that? I can't remember. She said audience member. But yeah, I mean, it's a crowd of constituents. They're asking and they're protesting because they need her. She's their voice in Congress. They need her to do the stuff for them because they're not allowed to do it themselves. And if she doesn't care about it, it's like, why are you here? She's really talking to constituents like they're 3, and she will probably be reelected. I mean, yeah, she won comfortably last time. I wouldn't be surprised if this sort of gaffe, which would have been a career ender at some point in history, I mean, this is just forgotten about in a week or so because, I don't know, there'll be another scandal. This is another way. It's just frustrating because it doesn't matter what the scandal is. Republicans can just ignore them because their own voters don't care about hypocrisy or cruelty or stupidity. Those are all features, not the bug, right? If you're voting for a Republican. All right, I'm going to jump to a different story now. Let's talk about this guy. His name is Sean Feucht. Sean Feucht. I had to say the name right because I'll show you a picture of this dude. There he is. That's Sean Feucht with the Weird Al hair. Sean Feucht, F-E-U-C-H-T. It's pronounced Feucht, rhymes with exploit. For years now, he's kind of been in the spotlight because he's just a horrible person. And if you're not familiar with this dude, let me give you some recaps of what this guy has done. In 2020, he became kind of famous because he started holding these big concerts in the middle of COVID when there was no vaccine. And he would say, we're going to sing worship music. Sean Feucht is a musician. He's like, come to my concert in the public, in the open. We'll do it outside, but you can all cram in next to each other. No masks needed. And this is a headline that's not unfair. Jesus Christ super spreader? because he was a super spreader of the virus. He exacerbated public health emergencies. What else has he done? He has spoken at events. This is an event he spoke at in 2023 in Eastern Washington, alongside a guy named Matt Shea, who is a pastor and Washington lawmaker. And look at this sentence. Feucht was joined on stage by Pastor Matt Shea, a former state lawmaker who was kicked out of the state Republican caucus. Republicans kicked him out after an independent investigation found him guilty of domestic terrorism. But whatever, Sean Feucht hangs out with a domestic terrorist because he's Christian. What else has he done? Remember this in the news? Like last week, Russell Brand was accused in a UK court of rape and sex assault charges. Well, guess what Sean Feucht did last week? Look at the date on this. It's 9 days ago. Here he is doing a mass revival on a beach with Russell Brand. Why? Because Russell Brand is also a Christian. So Sean Feucht's like, yep, these are my people. I don't care what you're accused of. So this is what Sean Feucht does. He held this mass baptism with a predator. He shared a stage with a domestic terrorist. He held these super spreader events. But because he plays Christian music and talks about Jesus, a bunch of white evangelicals just give him a pass on all of this. But what's interesting is that this week, his allies, his former allies, have started to go after him. Not because he's a Christian extremist, mind you, but because they think he's a horrible person in all the other ways. And this is kind of amazing. They set up a website. It's called truthandfreedomstories.com. And it's like, this is the front page, financial, spiritual, and moral allegations against Sean Feucht. And just read this thing at the top here. This is based on 5 people who used to work with this guy. Based on the documented and corroborated nature of these concerns, we strongly urge that Sean Feucht be removed from positions of leadership and financial stewardship. This statement is made in good faith for the purpose of preventing further harm and upholding standards of biblical accountability, transparency, and justice. Like, what on earth did they document that they say you need to remove this guy from power and take away his credit cards? What else do they say? We have consistently witnessed Sean publicly point his finger at the sin of the world, yet repeatedly failed to take responsibility for acknowledging, repenting of, and turning away from his own serious and habitual sin. What else? Having witnessed firsthand what we have witnessed about Sean, we can no longer encourage financial contributions to him and his endeavors. We can no longer encourage anyone to work for him, paid or unpaid. And we can no longer encourage anyone to partner with him in any ministry capacity or invest in him financially due to the following egregious, corroborated, and long-standing sin. And then they start to tell you specifics: the moral, ethical misconduct, abuse of power, retaliation against whistleblowers, negligence of oversight. What else? And then their request for action. Look who it's signed by. These are all people who worked for a ministry that is affiliated with Sean Feucht called Burn 24/7. Which is a Christian thing because they love the fire and they're burning with the passion for the Jesus 24/7. And some of them worked for other groups too, but these are not randoms. These are not randos. These are not critics like me. These are people who worked with him because they believed in the mission of what he was doing and they saw what was going on and they're like, we cannot back this up anymore. So what is it that they are referring to? Well, let me show you a couple things. If you go back last year, there's a website called Ministry Watch that kind of focuses on how do Christian ministries spend their money? Are they buying the pastor a private jet? Are they buying him a mansion? Are they good stewards of the donations they get? And this is what they posted late last year about Sean Feucht Ministries specifically. The organization does not file a Form 990 or make it available to the public. It petitioned the IRS to change its status to a church. There is therefore no updated financial information after 2020. This is interesting. They're saying Sean Feucht Ministries, they used to file the paperwork all nonprofits have to file. But after 2020, they asked the IRS, hey, you know how we do that worship music every week or whatever it is? We just want to call ourselves a church. And the IRS said, okay, then I guess you don't have to file the paperwork. And the thing is, Focus on the Family has done this, even though they're not a church. A lot of right-wing religious organizations that are not churches have now changed their designation with the IRS to be churches. Why? Because churches don't have to file transparency paperwork. And look at the top paragraph here too. Because they cannot see what Sean Feucht is doing, its transparency grade slipped from a D, which was bad, to an F. And their donor confidence score fell from 46 to 21. So even Ministry Watch is like, don't give money to this group. We cannot vouch for where the money is going. And this is kind of where the ministry, this is where those whistleblowers decided to run with it. Because they're saying, we know what's going on here. Here's one of the things they pointed out on their website. For years in a row, Sean Feucht Ministries, they took in about $250,000 a year. In the late 2010s, 2018, 2019, they were getting about $250,000, $300,000 a year for Sean, for their staff, whatever. In 2020, this is when he's doing those COVID super spreader concerts, his ministry made $4.5 million. And I think, this is me speculating, he realized, oh, I'm making a ton of money because I'm basically a right-wing pretend martyr who's doing these concerts. I got to hide my money now so no one knows what I'm doing with it. So he asked the IRS to call him a church. They said, okay, now he doesn't have to file the paperwork anymore. So all of a sudden he's making millions of dollars. He doesn't have to tell anybody where it's going. Any decent organization that comes across a windfall like that should let donors know how they're going to spend that money. Sean Feucht said, oh, I'm not telling you anything. But again, just because you're not transparent doesn't mean you're doing anything shady. But this is where the whistleblowers come in because they say, we know what's happening. And among their allegations that they point out, this is some of the stuff they say on their website. Sean Feucht operates multiple nonprofit organizations that all do the same thing. Like he has 4 ministries. He solicits money for all 4 of them. But like when he does his worship concert, that's a checkbox for all 4 of them. So like you're getting 4 different solicitations for the same thing. That's like me doing this YouTube live stream, but having 3 different cameras pointed at me. And on all 3 of them, I'm asking for money. It's like, you're triple dipping. You can't do that. That's unethical at the very least. They also say after he got that surge in revenue, he stopped reporting about his financials. It says the ministry owns properties, including multi-million-dollar parsonages. These are mansions in different parts of the country. They actually pointed out he has $1 million hunting lodge in Montana. What ministry purpose does that serve? Your guess is as good as mine. They said he personally owns at least 10 properties in California, Montana, and Pennsylvania. Numerous allegations of financial impropriety. Basically, he's treating his ministry's treasury like his personal slush fund. And then multiple testimonials from people who worked with him documenting patterns of spiritual, emotional, and psychological abuse. And they have documentation for all of this stuff, lots of anecdotal stuff, some paperwork to back this up. But they said he lies about how many volunteers work for his organization. He doesn't pay those volunteers even when they start to do work that really should be done by a staffer. So he treats them as employees, but then he doesn't pay them like employees. Former staffers mentioned that abuse from him. He exaggerates, they said, he exaggerates how many people come to his events and how many get baptized. He lies about what he needs money for. He pretends to be persecuted when even those whistleblowers are like, dude, you're not persecuted. You're treated the same as everyone else. And they say the people who serve on the boards of his various ministries don't really do any real oversight. And whenever anyone raises questions about how he's spending money privately, he defames them, blacklists them, and threatens to sue them. This is all in their mix of things they are accusing him of. And so after all this, they end with a handful of recommendations. And this is what they say. What should we do here? I know, by the way, some of you are like, wait, the scandal has nothing to do with drugs or abusing somebody physically. It's like, no, it's not those scandals. It's just run-of-the-mill religious abuse. That's what this is. Financial shenanigans, things like that. So this is what the whistleblowers recommend. We want a formal investigation into the financial practices of his various ministries. We want to examine whether he's using these ministry funds appropriately when it comes to real estate acquisitions. We want the IRS to review the legitimacy of the church reclassification to a church granted in 2022. Investigate the potential private benefits that he's getting. Assess the compliance with laws when it comes to financial transactions and reporting. And we want evaluation of board oversight and governance practices. Some of this stuff his groups could do if they cared about it. But here's the thing, the IRS isn't going to do any of this. The IRS isn't doing anything right now. They're not auditing wealthy people who avoid paying their taxes. They're not investigating churches that tell you how to vote, even though that goes against their rules. So I don't think they're going to pay attention to this. But if the IRS doesn't do it, what's the point of saying any of this? And I think the big takeaway is for all the Christians who give money to Sean Feucht or who like Sean Feucht, they should know the people who work with him don't like this dude. And the people who work with him who know how the sausage is made is like, you should not give money to this guy because it's not going towards spreading the gospel like he says. It's going into his pocket so he could buy more houses and things like that. So that's interesting as well. Like, I don't think the IRS is going to do anything, but maybe some of these Christians will finally get it through their minds that it's not critics of Sean Feucht that are going after him this time. It's his own people. It's the people he worked with who are deeply devout Christians who are saying, we don't trust this dude. It also sends a message, I think, to the other Christians who might be working with his ministries right now, which is if you actually care about the mission and spreading the message of Jesus, then make sure Sean Feucht is not running your group. Make sure doesn't have access to the money. Take away his credit cards. And what did Sean Feucht say about all of this? At first, he didn't respond. For like days, he did not respond. And then on Tuesday of this week, he finally responded. And this is what he said. Birds of a feather working together when Soros-backed Christianity Today. Let's pause there. So a bunch of groups wrote about what these whistleblowers said. Christianity Today is an evangelical publication. Their news division does really good work. I can admit that. And he's like, oh, whatever. They're backed by the Jew. What the hell? That's what Soros-backed is. It's affiliated with a Jewish conspiracy guy we don't like. When Soros-backed Christianity Today and Rolling Stone and the LGBTQ, that's new, mafia gang up to attack Christians, they're not attacking Christians. They're calling you specifically out for misusing money. When they attack Christians, you know a big breakthrough is coming. Hashtag whatever, all caps, never back down, prayer emoji. Like just denial. He's deflecting. He's calling names of the people who are writing fair articles about what the whistleblowers said. What he's not doing, by the way, is responding to the allegations and explaining why they're wrong. I think that is telling. This guy doesn't want to address the substance. And if this is his way of just dismissing the allegations, then he's just further gaslighting all those former staffers. Like at the end of the day, none of this is that surprising. Someone who is this deep into the megaverse is bound to be a grifter. The only question is, how is he going to do it? How is he going to try to steal everyone's money? But if the allegations bear out, and that's assuming anyone close to Feucht cares to investigate, which I don't know that they do, I don't think he's going to ever apologize, much less change his actions. He's very stubborn and he's very convicted in his faith, or so he says. So he'll do what conservative Christians everywhere do when they're accused of wrongdoing. Deny everything, pretend Satan is coming after you, treat your critics as liars who hate Jesus, and urge followers to give you even more cash so you could battle these charges. That's usually the trajectory I have seen. But I'm proud of those whistleblowers for coming out. Like, good for them for doing this. I don't know what it's going to accomplish, but that's a brave thing to do. And they put their names on it, which is a huge thing. So good for them. Oh, what do we got here? Question-wise. Oh, I appreciate that donation, Vicky. Thank you so much. And yes, thank you, Den, as well, for helping out. Evangelicals not behaving ethically? I know. And they vote for people who are unethical too. Can you believe it? He should not have responded at all. He'd be better off. Yeah, I was wondering, like a day passed and he didn't respond except for one cryptic tweet that maybe was a response to it. And then the next day he went ahead and just blamed everybody for reporting on it, which is never a good sign for him. All right, I'm going to jump to the next story. Give me a second here to pull it up and close some of these tabs. All right. Okay. Colorado recently passed a law that is generally good for transgender people. This is the headline that said transgender Coloradans receive new discrimination protections as Governor Jared Polis signs bill into law. This is House Bill 1312. It's called the Kelly Loving Act. And you can see in the subheading there, it makes it easier to change your name, your gender identity on your driver's license, on your passport, birth certificates, things like that. That's nice. Among the other things this bill does is it says if you're a public school that has a dress code for boys and girls, you cannot punish a student for wearing clothes of either group. So for trans kids who might dress one way, you can't punish them for not wearing what you think they should be wearing. So that's helpful. It also says if public schools have a policy that teachers can use students' nicknames, well, then you got to use trans kids' chosen names as well. Fine, good. I mean, those are all good things. So yay, I'm glad this bill passed. Now, interestingly enough, this is actually the watered down version of the bill because the original version said if you're dead naming or misgendering a trans person, that violates the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act. And if you're in a place of public accommodation, judges could use that against you as an act of discrimination if you're dead naming them. It also, the original version of this bill also said if there is a custody battle between two parents and the judge is trying to decide how much time a child should spend in each parent's home, if the child is trans and one of the parents is dead naming them and not respecting their gender identity, the judge could factor that in when deciding custody time. Now, those two aspects of the bill, the dead naming being anti-discriminatory and the custody battles, those two provisions were stripped from the final bill. There was a lot of controversy about it. Even some Democrats were reluctant to sign off on that, so they got rid of them. So the version of the bill that got signed, it's good. Doesn't really do any of the big things some advocates were hoping for. But the big thing you should take away from this is that all of this would apply to public spaces. Because if people want to be anti-trans bigots in their private lives, they're allowed to be. That is kind of how free speech works, right? Civil rights laws were passed. You'll never believe this. There are still racists around. And sometimes they get elected to things. So passing a law that prohibits public discrimination of trans people, that's good, but also private discrimination is still very much allowed. So the point is that law would not apply to churches or just individuals who are horrible people. Like if J.K. Rowling steps foot in Colorado, she'll be just fine. You know what I mean? And yet, for months while this bill was being debated, there was a group that was fighting against this bill. This is the website they set up, the Fight Against Colorado House Bill 1312. And according to this, who are they? This is a small group of Colorado pastors and faith leaders from small churches across the state. And they're doing all we can together to oppose these assaults on our people's God-given liberties, by which they mean we really hate trans people and we want to keep hating trans people. And we want to protect our right to really hate trans people. And they're saying that this bill needs to be stopped because it'll go against their bigotry, which they really want to preserve somehow. So this website, it was run by a group called Fight 1312. And that's that group of pastors. Now, one of those group's ringleaders, it was a guy named Pastor Chris Goebel of Ridgeline Community Church. Let me show you what he said to his congregation back in April when he was starting this little Fight 1312 group.
HB 25-1312 would make it a crime to be honest about reality and to refuse to call someone by their gender-confused pronouns. Furthermore, it would force even faith-based schools to have to call a confused child their fake pronouns, and would fine these schools if they didn't. And lastly, and most heinously, parents could even lose custody of their children, of their God-given children, to the godless state if they didn't affirm their child's gender confusion.
So pretty much all of that was wrong. None of that was accurate. Just to be clear here, anti-trans discrimination would be prohibited in public spaces, but bigots being bigots in church would not be a crime because it's never a crime. Faith-based schools would not have to adhere to these laws. And even though that custody part was stripped out of the final bill, parents would not lose custody of their kids just for being a shitty parent. They never have. Basically, a judge could just take their refusal to acknowledge a trans child as one factor of many when considering what to do and where the child should spend time. Things like that. So, like, if one parent is hell-bent on making his kid's life miserable, no matter the reason, then a judge can factor that into the equation. But anyway, that part was stripped later. So he's wrong about the very basics of this bill. And yet, 2 weeks ago or so, about 2 weeks ago, when he was speaking about this, now after those provisions were taken out, he was still lying about the bill, but this time he went even further. I want to play this for you. It's disturbing. Take special note of how he's pretending he's the victim in all this, and how he's still just an absolute jerk when it comes to trans people. I've tried to bleep one part of it out. See if you could tell why.
And as I've told you guys several times, I will not comply with any aspect of this abomination of a law in any way, shape, or form at any time. They can threaten my job. They can threaten my freedom. They can Jack Phillips me to the Supreme Court for the next decade. I don't care. I'm your Huckleberry. I've been shot at. I'm not worried about Gestapo blasphemy laws. And I'll model that this morning in this way. There is, in the course of all of our involvement down at the Capitol over the last month and a half, a very confused and broken member of our state legislature who goes by the name of Brianna Titone. But Brianna is actually is a man. We have poor who's very confused and is a person desperately in need of Jesus, just like you and me. And what I've just said is now considered illegal under this law, but it'll allow me to be even more clear and go even further. You were fearfully and wonderfully made as a man in the image by the one true God of the universe who loves you, and he does not make mistakes.
I mean, he's just an asshole. What he said doesn't make him a criminal. It just makes him an asshole. Because what he said was never considered illegal under this law. It's not illegal for a pastor to be transphobic or racist or sexist. I mean, it'll make me think less of him and everyone who attends his church. But at no point would he ever go to jail or get sued for delivering a hate-filled sermon. White evangelical churches do it every week. They're doing just fine. Right? It's just par for the course for them. And as much as he wants to cosplay as a martyr, he's just a jackass using his platform to bring down others. Brianna Titone, who's one of the co-sponsors of this bill in Colorado, she uses her platform to lift marginalized people up. That's the difference between those two. This guy also, I mean, besides just saying that she needs Jesus, which, what the hell? This idea they can threaten my job, they can threaten my freedom, they can Jack Phillips me to the Supreme Court. Jack Phillips is the Christian baker who's like, I own a bakery, but trans people or gay people want to give me money to buy one of my cakes. Ew, I don't want cootie money. And so he's been going back and forth in the legal system. That's Jack Phillips. That guy's just an asshole who doesn't want to take gay money. And this pastor is like, they can Jack Phillips me to the Supreme Court. No one wants Jack Phillips in the Supreme Court. Jack Phillips definitely wants Jack Phillips in the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, his enemies were like, oh, you have a bakery? We want to give you money to buy one of your cakes. Can we do that? And he's like, no. He also says, I don't care. He says, I'm your Huckleberry, which is a line from Tombstone, the movie from like the early 90s, as if he's a hero here. He's taking the bullets for you. I've been shot at. Dude, you're a pastor in a white Christian church. You're doing fine. And then I'm not worried about Gestapo blasphemy laws. They're not. You said it right there and no one cares. We're calling you out for being a dick, but like the Gestapo is not coming after you. Anyway, you would vote for the Gestapo. What are you talking about? So after all of this, he bragged about his supposed martyrdom on social media. This is what he posted. I broke the law during my sermon this morning, several times actually, and in both services, because resistance to tyrants is obedience to God. He can't even spell resistance correctly. But no, he did not break the law. The law did not apply to him. This guy is so desperate to be a victim, he's just lying, and no Christian is going to call him out on it because, I don't know, they don't care about lies. You know how badly you have screwed things up when the local news is like, yeah, this dude's a liar. They're like famously not good at local news in general does not call out pastors or politicians. But here's 9 News' Kyle Clark, who's very good at his job. What I've just said is now considered illegal, Goebel told his church. That is not true. The pastors and ministers that are anticipating martyrdom are going to be very disappointed, said civil rights attorney David Lane, because this statute does not apply to them. And then later on, the law applies to businesses, hospitals, schools, and other public places, but specifically does not apply to a church, synagogue, mosque, or other place that is principally used for religious purposes. They have religious freedom rights, Lane said. They can spout all the hate they want from the pulpit, anytime, anywhere. I like this guy. He gets it. And then, this is hilarious, Goebel did not respond to requests for comments on whether he was confused about the law or intentionally misled his congregation. And then look at this. Fellow Fight 1312 organizer, Pastor Chase Davis of the Well Church in Boulder, falsely claimed that the new law would criminalize Christianity. When asked whether the pastors knew their claims were inaccurate, Davis told the journalist, Kyle Clark, to repent his sins and find Jesus. Because of course they did. It's the Joni Ernst response, which is, I'm not going to respond to the thing you caught me in, which is a lie, so I'll just tell you you need Jesus. Well, those pastors presumably have Jesus, and I've seen where that gets them. They are just horrible human beings. So why would I want to worship the same God as those people? Doesn't make any sense. These people never apologize. They never explain themselves. They just condemn the people asking honest questions about their lies. So again, the good news here is that the pastors and their faith-based hate was ignored by decent lawmakers. The bill was signed into law. That is a good thing, even though it was watered down. I will also say there have already been 2 legal challenges against it, both of them saying that this law violates their First Amendment rights. One came from a random group of bigots. The other came from an anti-transgender sports apparel company because they built their whole clothing store based on their hatred of trans people. But they're saying our First Amendment rights are violated. No, they haven't been. And in the lawsuits, they don't say how they've been violated. Again, bigots can be bigots. It's allowed. I don't know what First Amendment rule has been broken here. No church has ever been shut down for being anti-trans. We just expect it. So anyway, these pastors are doing fine. The government hasn't come after them. The government is not going to come after them, not federally, not in Colorado. But do not hold your breath waiting for those pastors to apologize for lying to people. It's just what they do. This is how conservative Christians work. They like pretending to be persecuted by people who, honestly, all they want is to live their lives and be left the hell alone. And these Christians pretend to be victims when they are the bullies. and they can't tell the difference. Nothing in their moral system ever taught them who the good guys are. And their parishioners are too cowardly to challenge these guys or leave those churches and go find a better one. So whatever. I just wanted to show you those videos to show you how Christians are lying about this harmless bill. What questions we got here? Thanks for that donation, Olivia. If you have bad vision, don't get LASIK. If you got a heart malformation, don't get operated. God doesn't make any mistakes. I mean, this is the thing. These same pastors who are like, God makes no mistakes. You were born a boy or a girl, and that's the way it should be. They're the same ones who will get operations. They'll go to the hospital to fix something they don't love. If they have a heart attack, you better believe they're going to find a doctor and not just pray for health. They always want to fix what they think is wrong with them, and they're not praying to get better. But when it comes to trans people, nope, God made you this way. You're stuck that way, so be it. Total hypocrisy. Paul said to obey the authority. It doesn't say to oppose tyrants. Thank you for that. I appreciate that clarification. Thank you, Keith. I will take your queer money, and I appreciate that. Happy Pride Month. Sean says, I'm happy living in liberal Colorado, but I worry that national law will supersede our state law. That could happen. And honestly, I'm not even a fan of the governor of Colorado these days, even though he's a Democrat. But, I mean, you hope that the people in charge of your state, if it's a blue state, are doing good things. And this is a good thing. It's not as great as it could be, but it's a good thing. And that's all you can ask for. Like, at this point anyway, you can't control what the Supreme Court's going to do or what Republicans in Congress are going to do. So, you take the wins you can get, and you hope that states will fight back if the federal government tries to get in their way. My trans friends are not offended by being mistakenly misgendered. They're offended by the cruelty. Yeah, and that's what that pastor is doing, right? He's not making a mistake. He's purposely lying. He's purposely dead-naming that politician because he just wants to be hurtful. That's what brings him joy in life. The godless state? Has he read the news? He should check out this live stream. I roll my eyes anytime I hear a conservative Christian call out the godless state. It's like, all right, well, if you want to get rid of all the religious references in our culture, in our politics, I'm happy to do it, but it's not happening. So I don't know what you think a godless state looks like, because this is pretty Christian to me. I hate the words homophobia and transphobia. They're not afraid. They are just assholes. Fair point. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. The pastor has got it down. He's got his sincerity shtick down pat. Ditto his pretend loving shtick. I think it's one of the requirements if you're an evangelical Christian pastor. You got to have the fake sincerity voice, the fake I love you. That's why I want what's best for you. And what's best for you is not being anything I hate, which is gay or trans. Ugh. It's always fake concern. I've heard this. I've been on the receiving end of it as an atheist. I love you. That's why I want you to find my God and only my God. That sort of thing. Thanks for that. I'm an unfriendly atheist. Hail Satan. Well, welcome to the club. All right, let me jump to another story here. This is an interesting one because I have not seen this covered everywhere, and I only saw it in a very loose way, but I think you'll find it interesting. So this is a wacky legal situation, but I think it elucidates a bigger point here. Basically, there was a recent legal ruling out of Arizona. It's got no media coverage, but it was brought to my attention because of a topic I've talked about a lot on this live stream, which is something called clergy penitent privilege. And generally speaking, and I know we talked about this just last week, if you confess your sins to a priest, you can rest assured those conversations are confidential. The priest is not going to rat you out if you say, I did something bad and I feel guilty about it. The priest is not going to go off and tell everybody. So even if you say you stole something somewhere or that you're the victim of a crime, the priest is under no obligation to share that with law enforcement, right? Unlike, say, social workers and teachers and anyone else who's a mandated reporter, where if you tell them you are the victim of some kinds of abuse, they may have to they are legally obligated to tell the police about it. Now, the problem is that there is one major loophole in that ruling. What happens if someone confesses that they have committed the sexual abuse of a child? In Washington state, and this is what I talked about last week, in Washington state, state lawmakers just passed a law requiring priests to report those confessions to the police. And as I mentioned, Catholic bishops are now suing the state to undo that because they prioritize dogmatic secrecy and they're on the side of the predators and they do not care about the safety of children. But one of the comments I've gotten a lot in the wake of that Washington state story is that, come on, what are the odds that someone's actually a predator who goes to church and goes to confession and tells a priest that they actually did this horrible thing? Who does that? Why would anyone do that? Like, how many times is a priest going to be in a position where they are hearing that confession? Come on, that never really happens. Well, let me tell you what's happening in Arizona, because this involves a confession and a weird outcome. So let me share with you a picture of this dude right here. This is Mario Rodriguez Ramirez. And in 2021, this dude was arrested in Tempe, Arizona on charges of child sexual abuse. He had been the pastor of a place called Arcadia Park Baptist Church for several years, but then these allegations came up and the church dismissed him. And so now this guy was out of a job and he had not been arrested yet, but it didn't look great. And there was a months-long investigation by the Tempe Police Department, and then he was later taken into custody. And why was he taken into custody? Well, check this out from a local news channel at the time. During the investigation, court documents said Rodriguez Ramirez admitted his actions and said he knew it was wrong and regrets it. During a recorded conversation with a family member, this dude said his mind was clouded and he was fighting his urges. So he confessed to what he did to a family member. That family member was recording what he said, and he basically said, I had urges. I was fighting them. I did it. I knew it was wrong. I regret it. Well, you can't regret something you haven't done. You know what I mean? And this family member was recording the whole conversation. And because of that, this guy was arrested on 2 counts of sexual abuse, sexual conduct with a minor, child molestation, aggravated assault, and voyeurism, and indecent exposure while at the Tempe Home Depot. That story is apparently he took a child to the back of that store and assaulted her there. Rodriguez Ramirez is facing 1 charge of felony sexual conduct with a minor because he assaulted that child, and the other one he touched inappropriately. It's just very, very disturbing stuff. Okay, so he's still on trial today. Like, we have not gotten a verdict in his case yet, but there's been a recent snag in the case, which is confusing because, like, what's the controversy? Didn't he already admit to everything? Well, no, not exactly. It turns out that this recorded conversation with a family member in which he admitted to, like, fighting his urges and admitting this all happened, it was made to his brother-in-law, who is also a pastor. Not just a pastor, but this guy's co-pastor. They were running the same church together. And he also coincidentally happens to be the uncle of one of the victims. I know it's a weird little chain there, but Rodriguez Ramirez confessed what he did to his partner at the church, who is his brother-in-law, who is the uncle of one of the victims, and he said all this to him. And he did this in mid-2020, in the middle of COVID. So they didn't actually, like, go to church. They didn't go to like each other's houses to discuss this. They went to a public park because the only way you could go see somebody in theory was outdoors. And so they met in a park, and this brother-in-law is like, I've heard things, and I'm going to record this conversation just in case. So he did it privately. And so he recorded this conversation. And what did they talk about? Rodriguez Ramirez was asking his brother-in-law, like, what should I do about this? How is the church going to move forward? Should I tell the congregation why I'm stepping down? Or can I just like walk away quietly and not tell anybody what I did? I also want to show you this. This is from a court document, the bottom of number 30 here. He also expressed concern about the harm to the church, the congregation, the alleged victim, and the alleged victim's family. The co-pastor acknowledged those actions, discussed the harm it caused the alleged victim, and spoke about the spiritual ramifications for Rodriguez Ramirez. I am kind of amused is the wrong word. The fact that he's like, oh no, what's going to happen to the church and not the girl I just assaulted? Like his primary concern is what happens to our church? But that's why he's talking to his co-pastor about this. So he didn't know this was being recorded. And the thing is, this brother-in-law recorded this whole conversation and then shared it with some church members and another pastor. And somehow, and I don't know if this is because of the brother-in-law, this recording ended up in the hands of the police. And they used that as evidence to arrest the first guy. So here's the question that created all this controversy. Can that recording be used in the trial in the case of Rodriguez Ramirez? Can you use that recording in the trial? Well, the state of Arizona, the Tempe police, they said, yeah, we can absolutely use this confession because this wasn't a formal religious confession. Like, look at everything they talked about. They were not, it's not like he was there asking for forgiveness. They were chatting about business. How are we going to move the church forward? How is the church going to be okay? The lawyers for the pastor, Rodriguez Ramirez, they said, listen, you cannot use this tape because the only reason he was spilling his guts to his brother-in-law is because he knew he was speaking to a fellow pastor who would keep all this a secret. So the specifics of what they talked about don't matter because this was a confession. That's the argument his lawyers are making. And so this got in front of Maricopa County Superior Court Judge Kristen Culbertson, and she heard these arguments, and she said, you guys, it is, quote, not reasonable to pretend this conversation is for the purpose of spiritual guidance. In other words, you guys, this is not a confession. She said, of course, we can allow this recording to be used as evidence. And in response to that decision, lawyers for Rodriguez Ramirez, with help from the right-wing legal group First Liberty Institute, they asked an Arizona appellate court to step in and undo that decision before that first judge ever issued any sort of formal ruling in the trial. And recently, they issued their verdict, the appellate court. It was a 3-0 decision, and the Arizona Court of Appeals said the recording cannot be admitted into evidence because this counts as a confession. It is a privileged conversation. They said that, to explain their reasoning, they said the two men were talking about religious stuff, which makes it a confession. So there you go. And this is kind of unbelievable what they are citing in defense of this. Let me show you this right here. Number 30 again. Here's the full section. Under this standard, Rodriguez Ramirez's conversation with the co-pastor constitutes a confession. He spoke with his co-pastor about his earlier actions, said he was struggling with unwanted urges, acknowledged concern about what he did. He also expressed concern about the harm to the church, the congregation, the alleged victim's family. The co-pastor acknowledged all this, discussed the harm it caused the alleged victim, and spoke about the spiritual ramifications for Rodriguez Ramirez. So in context, they're saying, see, that's why it is a confession. What else do we got? Look at number 31 here. During the discussion, Rodriguez Ramirez sought the co-pastor's help to minimize harm to the congregation. Got to take care of the church, not the victim. The communication also addressed matters of church management. They talked about whether it would be better for him to just leave without telling the congregation the truth. Alternatively, they considered whether it would be better to face the congregation. It reflected a concern for the congregation. For Rodriguez Ramirez, a clergy member, Church management concerns reflect how he could reach harmony with himself and the other members of his church. The conversation, thus, was a confession. This is how they are arguing that this guy's confession of abusing a child doesn't matter because he was just seeking spiritual help. So there you go. It goes on like this for a while. Basically, because the co-pastor offered spiritual guidance, we're supposed to assume this is all a confession worthy of confidentiality. It doesn't matter that they met at a park, the court says, because it was during the pandemic, so they couldn't go into a confession booth. And the end result of this is that the recording and the transcript of the recording and the testimony from the brother-in-law about what they discussed, none of that can be used in the criminal trial of this pastor, who, by the way, has pleaded not guilty. And that means I don't know what evidence they're going to have to use against this guy other than like the accusations of some children. It's possible this pastor gets little or no punishment despite plenty of actual evidence he did the thing he's been accused of, all because a lot of that evidence was mixed in with religion during a conversation with his brother-in-law, who was also his business partner. Like, it's just a ridiculous reason to ignore that evidence, in my opinion. It would be a damn shame if the victims did not see justice, all because they got abused by a pastor instead of a teacher. And that's also why I think the clergy penitent privilege is so damning, and why every single state should make sure predators do not get to use it as a loophole. Here's an example of a pastor using it as a loophole. That trial is happening now. That first judge has to now take this into consideration, not use the recording or anything associated with it when coming to a decision about whether this guy is guilty or not. And I don't know how that ends, but that is a very disturbing story. All right, what questions we got here? My moral obligation to report abuse or do something about it outweighs my legal obligation. These priests are upset because now they can't be absolved of those sins privately as well. Like, if you were a good person and you had the power to stop a child from getting abused, and all you had to do is tell someone, hey, this child's getting abused, wouldn't you do it? That, like, there are ethical dilemmas. This is not one of them. This is not the trolley problem. This is pretty easy. And these Catholic priests and these co-pastors of whatever denomination they work with, like, they're all failing the easiest ethical test of all time. Come on. So everything told to this guy is automatically privileged? Yup. That's what the appellate court said. You can't use anything in the recording. Very disturbing. This is going to affect our income is the base of their concern. I mean, that's the first thing they talked about. Not what are we going to do about the victim or her family or anything like that. It's how are we going to keep this church going? Should I just leave quietly without telling anyone what I did? They're Baptists. Baptists don't do confession. There should be no controversy. But if you're a priest and you hear something in the spirit of confession, they count that as a confession. Oh, I know this feels wrong to say like and subscribe after that story, but there you go. I got a couple more for you, and then I will wrap it up here. I had an update on a story I covered a while back that I wanted to share with you. You may remember that in the city of Quincy, Massachusetts, it's spelled like Quincy, but I guess it's pronounced Quincy, they are building a $175 million public safety headquarters. And it's going to house the police department and the administrative offices for the fire department and emergency management. Like, they've already approved of this. This place is being built. It's scheduled to open this fall. $175 million building. But the reason I talked about this, I think a couple of months ago, is because even though the city council had to approve the amount of money that was going to be used to build this thing between 2017 and 2022, the mayor of the town decided to make some updates. This is the mayor of the town. His name is Tom Koch. And he decided to just write in later on that we're going to make an addition to the building. And he said, I want to add these two Catholic statues to the front of the building. How much will it cost? $850,000. What are these statues? On your left, you could see St. Michael the Archangel, and on the right, you see St. Florian, and these are the patron saints of police and firefighters. And what's really disturbing about this, if you zoom in on the police statue, this is not the statue they're putting up, it's a version of the statue. One is the angel is holding a weapon. I'm not sure that's a great look for the police, holding a sword of death, but okay. And then what is this angel doing? Stomping on the neck of a bad guy, which again, I don't think that's a great look for the police right now. I don't know why this is the statue you would want to put up in front of your police department. The other one of St. Florian is using a little jug of water to put out a fire. All right, that's all it takes. If that's your representation of the fire department, all right. But again, Catholic statues, Catholic saints, $850,000. The mayor decided to just write that into the blueprint, did not run that by city council. City council was, at least one of those members was very upset about this. And to no surprise, Koch, the mayor, he is Catholic, and he tried to convince the city council when they found out about this, that this is all totally secular. He said the saints add interest and connect to the uses of the building. He said St. Michael is a common figure in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. But they don't worship these statues in the same way. Like none of these statues, he said, are religious. He stressed they represent bravery, courage, and service. Which again, if that's your goal, if you want to stress bravery, courage, and service, put up statues of other firefighters and police officers. Why are you putting up Catholic idols? You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. He said it seemed natural to do those images, but it would only be natural if you live in a religious bubble. But this is what the guy did. One of the city council members said he wasn't told about these plans at all. He categorically rejected them, but he didn't get a say in the matter. He also pointed out, this is, what's the guy's name? Dan Minton, who's one of the city council members. He said people don't want to enter a police station, period. Like it's usually something bad that has happened, ranging from an act of violence to a simple parking ticket. The statue may not be welcoming to someone already ill at ease. Yeah, if you're not Catholic, and maybe even if you are, you don't want to see that statue when you're walking in for a bad reason. You already don't feel good. So at the time when we found out about this, and we only found out about this because a local newspaper wrote about it earlier this year, the ACLU of Massachusetts sent a letter to the city saying, what the hell are you doing? Look at the very top of this letter. First, the purpose of the statues is plainly religious. And they went on to say, it doesn't matter what the mayor says about them. They're totally religious. Look at the bottom right over here. The issue here is whether a government entity may impose religious symbols upon all who work in, visit, or pass by the public safety building. And the answer to that question is resoundingly no. And they go on to say placing larger-than-life statues of Catholic saints in front of a public building unequivocally advances one religion to the exclusion of all others. You're telling everybody this is a Catholic community. Non-Catholics do not belong here. They are not valued here. All of that is accurate. So that was a warning letter saying it's not too late. You don't have to put these statues up. Don't do it. So they sent that letter. I actually appreciated this article in the Boston Globe. Check this out. They said two things in this Boston Globe article. Where's the first one? I'm losing it right now. Here we go. Sorry about this. Yeah, let me share this with you right here. It is one thing for a police officer to choose to carry around a medal that her faith says will offer divine protection. I think that's silly, but yes, it's fine. It's entirely another to erect two giant effigies outside a public building that will be used by people of all faiths or of no faith at all. And look at this too. When a city councilor asked Koch's chief of staff what those who oppose the statues should do, he essentially told them to go pound sand. Wait for the beautiful public artwork to appear on those buildings and enjoy it with the rest of the public, advised Chris Walker. The decision has been made. Like, Okay, but it doesn't mean it's legal. So anyway, there was an online petition to reject the statues. They asked the mayor, cut your losses, say no to these statues. And the mayor basically told everyone to shut the hell up. So here's the thing. I told you the ACLU sent a letter. Well, Americans United for Separation of Church and State and the Freedom from Religion Foundation, they also sent a letter on behalf of 6 residents of Quincy. And they said, these are people who live in your community. They all have a problem with the statues. And by the way, all these residents would have standing to bring a lawsuit against you. They also said these statues are not legal because it's kind of like putting up a Christian nativity scene outside a courthouse. The only way, even today, you can get away with that is by including other religious or secular symbols around it, alongside the nativity. But you can't just put up a symbol of one religion, and that's totally what you are doing here. What about the argument made by the mayor that these are secular symbols? They said, the problem with this claim is that police and firefighters don't invoke these figures for political reasons. They invoke them for religious protection. So they are used precisely because they are religious. So FFRF said the same basic things. They also are warning this city. If you go through with this, we will sue you. It's not too late. Cut your losses now. And the city basically said, yeah, we're not doing that. At least the mayor said that. So guess what happened this week? All of those groups joined forces and they filed this lawsuit against the city of Quincy and Mayor Koch, basically saying, yeah, this is 100% illegal. And what's very interesting, look at the list of plaintiffs, because all of those people, you're like, who are those people? Those are people who live in the community in Quincy, and they are a mix, Catholics, Protestants. I think there's a humanist in there as well. Jewish people, Unitarians, and they all have problems with these statues. Like one of them said, these statues would violate her religious commitment to peace activism, because one of those statues is like stomping on a neck of somebody. Another person said it would put her in the uncomfortable position of needing to speak out against statues of Catholic figures. Another said it creates an association between religion and the police department. And so what are they asking for? They are asking the courts now to block these statues from going up. They say, like, I don't care if you spent the money building these things, they can't go up. And they want to prevent any further funding of the statutes, and they want all the legal bills associated with it. All these groups did this lawsuit together, but look at what they all said. Here's FFRF co-president Annie Laurie Gaylor. This is a clear breach of the constitutional wall of separation. Quincy taxpayers should not have to foot the bill for an ostentatiously specific religious display. The ACLU of Massachusetts. The statutes send a message that the Quincy government favors one faith above all others. This flagrantly violates our state constitution. The ACLU National. Quincy residents who do not share the city's favored religious beliefs will get the message that they are not welcome. And Americans United. By installing religious statues in front of the government building dedicated to public safety, Koch and the city are violating that promise and sending a message to all who rely on city police and fire services that one faith is favored over all others. So all 4 of these groups are filing this lawsuit on behalf of a bunch of clients of various faiths and no faith, and they want to put a stop to these statues. Now, will it work? I don't know. But I don't think this case is on like the margins of the law. I think this one is pretty straightforward. What the city is doing is blatantly illegal. I hope a judge sees that. Like, it is kind of ironic that a costly facility meant to improve public safety has now become better known outside of the city for how it's going to exclude certain members of their community. But unless a judge steps in, the message that the mayor and the city council is sending could not be more clear. Catholicism is the official religion of the city, and if you disagree with that, too bad, so sad, you're not welcome here. It's the wrong message to send. I hope the lawsuit works. All right, what questions we got here? Anyone know if he has any relationship to the most privileged, white Koch brothers? I wondered that myself, and I could not find an answer to that. I didn't look very hard, but I don't know if he's connected to the Republican Party Koch brothers. So let them put up statues of Smokey the Bear and McGruff the police dog. I like that idea. By the way, and I know this for dumb reasons. It is not Smokey the Bear. How dare you? His name is Smokey Bear, and he doesn't have a middle name. Screw you, get it right. Those are both very non-binary looking. Mention that and that'll end the erection of the statues. Both kind of hot, though Michael's not my type. Listen, I know too much of your inner thoughts now, but that is a very funny gesture. I wonder if the follow-up, the appellate court, will hear the argument that these non-binary statues, ... So sick of fighting Christian nationalism. I know, isn't it so nice when the Christian nationalists are fighting amongst themselves like Musk and Elon are doing today? It's kind of fun to watch that. But I mean, this is the history of the church-state separation movement for like the past 50 years. It is us playing defense while Christian nationalists just continue to accumulate more and more power. Unfortunately, I don't know when, but this is what we have to look forward to. Just playing defense and trying not to make things get worse and worse, because we are not at the point when we can use the courts to our advantage like you could for a narrow band in like the 50s or 60s. Jesus the Christ. That, surprisingly, is the appropriate version of that name. Who knew? All right, I'm going to jump to one more story here before we get to last call. Let me pull this up really quick. All right. It's one last update for you on a story I covered already. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but the state of Washington recently passed a law requiring clergy members to report child abuse to law enforcement officials, even if they learn about it through the act of confession. It's a law that's going to protect children from predators. It'll prevent lifelong trauma. So why do I bring this up now? Because Catholic bishops have now filed a lawsuit to overturn it because they care more about predators than children. And just to give you a brief recap, like all this bill did is it adds members of the clergy to the list of mandated reporters in the state. And it specifically said clergy members would not be protected by an older law, which allows certain privileged communications to remain private. In other words, if you learn about abuse through confession, you cannot just say, it's confession, I don't have to tell anyone about it. You have to report it to authorities. And if we find out later you knew about this and didn't do anything, you could be prosecuted for it. And under the law, all mandated reporters, including priests, have to report suspicions of abuse within 48 hours. If they don't do that and they're caught, it could lead to a year-long prison sentence and a $5,000 fine. And when this bill was being debated, a Catholic bishop in Seattle, he argued it would be impossible for a priest to comply with this bill because he said the penalty for breaking that seal of confession is excommunication, which who cares what, I don't care about the rules of your weird game. Like in no rational world is getting excommunicated worse than letting a child continue to suffer sexual abuse. And if you would rather protect priests than kids, your organization should at least admit you do not care about children's safety. And it is telling that the Catholic governor of the state of Washington, Bob Ferguson, when he was asked about this bill and like whether he might veto it, this is what he said at the time. Keeping the confessional in the bill did not give Ferguson pause. Not for me, he said. As a Catholic, I'm very familiar with it. Been to confession myself. I felt this was important legislation for protecting kids. That's the Democratic governor saying that, but the conservative Catholic priests are like, what? No, who cares about the kids? So this is what it comes down to. What's more important, protecting a religious tradition or protecting children? And when like Democratic governors have a higher ethical standard than your church, your religion's probably doing something very, very wrong. So after the bill was signed, the Washington State Catholic Conference insisted, you guys, we totally care about protecting kids. This is the statement they put out after the bill was signed. While we remain committed to protecting minors and all vulnerable people from abuse. Really, Catholic Church, you think you're the poster boys for protecting kids? Priests cannot comply with this law if the knowledge of abuse is obtained through the sacrament of reconciliation. And here's how you know they know this is bad optics for them. Because they stop saying, well, if some dude confesses to abusing a kid in a little box in a Catholic church, yeah, the priest should have to tell the police. That's what's happening. But they're trying to cloak it using magical, mystical, multisyllabic language. So they're like, well, if this knowledge of abuse is obtained during the sacrament of reconciliation, doesn't that scare you? Why would you want to go up against that? That's how they're trying to scare people into thinking this is wrong. And then they also said, this is where it gets even more interesting. Look at what they said at the bottom here. Once the approved bill went to the governor for his signature, the bishops of the state of Washington asked for a meeting to discuss our concerns with the governor, who unfortunately did not respond to our request. We already knew what your request was. Why would we take that meeting just so we could say no? It's a waste of time. And this is also interesting. Once the state asserts the right to dictate religious practices and coerce information obtained within this sacrament, privileged communication, where is the line drawn between church and state? What else may the state now demand the right to know? What other religious practices will it try to legislate? Oh my God, all we are talking about is if a predator walks into the confession booth and says, yeah, I've been doing a lot of the predating. You know what I mean. If he says that, then you should tell police because he's going to hurt other kids. And the way they are distorting that fact to say the state is dictating our religious practices. Their religious practices are apparently shielding predators from being prosecuted. And they're trying to coerce information obtained within this sacrament, privileged communication. Yeah, it's a confession of abuse. Just say it. Like, stop hiding behind this language and just admit what you're doing, which is if a predator walks into our booth, we don't care if he keeps abusing children. His secret is safe with us. That's how confession works. Just say that. That's what this is all about. And they go on to say, why is this privileged communication between priest penitent the only one singled out? Why not attorney-client, doctor-patient, spouses? Here's the thing, and I've covered this in other videos. If you are representing a client for some reason and you find out that dude is molesting his kids or something, even a lawyer does not get to keep that secret. That's not why he's defending the dude, right? And a doctor-patient thing, if you find out your patient, it's not like you're saying, hey, doctor, I have a rash, and that's confidential between you two. If you confess you are molesting a kid, a doctor can, in fact, testify against you in court. You know who doesn't have to testify against you in court? Priests under this law. So this idea that priests have it worse than other groups that have some form of confidentiality is BS. Priests still actually have it better. They don't have to do as much stuff as other groups, much less teachers and social workers who are obligated to follow the law. So anyway, Washington was not targeting religious conduct. It wasn't impacting their rituals. Lawmakers just said you can't use, honestly, I think they have it backwards. It's not that the state was telling the Catholic Church how to run its religion. It's that the state said your religion cannot be used as an excuse not to follow the law. And I think that's backward. I think that's different. To put it another way, I think if the state cannot interfere with the religion's beliefs, the state should not be allowed to hand out exemptions to groups based on their religion. And I think that's the fix that they made with this law. The other reason I said this was all a problem is because suppose I gave the Catholic Church the option of saying there's no more privileged communication anywhere. Lawyers, if they hear something from a client, no longer confidential. Doctors, spouses, none of that stuff is confidential. So yeah, priests don't get any confidentiality either. Are you good with that now? And you know the Catholic bishops would be like, no, we demand special treatment for things we hear in confession. So they don't actually want to be treated the same as all these other groups. They want the bar to be low for everybody, while Democrats want the bar higher for everybody. Again, why are you losing an ethical battle to politicians? That's that on your part. Now, why am I bringing all this up now? Two reasons. One is, and I mentioned this earlier, last month, literally a month ago, the Justice Department under Pam Bondi and the Trump administration, these Republicans announced a First Amendment investigation into this law. Because the Trump administration is like, what? Predators might get in trouble? Oh no, step in, we got to protect them. And they said the Civil Rights Division, because they're not dealing with racism anymore, they're going to investigate the apparent conflict between Washington's law and the First Amendment's free exercise of religion. And again, I want to clarify, what do we mean by free exercise of religion under the First Amendment? For the Catholics in this story, the free exercise of religion is protecting child predators. Everyone should get used to saying that reflexively and stop using their language. But the other reason I wanted to point this out is that the Catholic bishops in Washington have now sued the state of Washington because they want their self-proclaimed right to protect sex predators. And look at how they are phrasing this in their lawsuit, because it's seriously disgusting. Let me share this with you. This is from their lawsuit. This is line 15, number 4. Putting clergy to the choice between temporal criminal punishment and eternal damnation, ... is something really bad. They are saying these are our only two choices. Keep the predator's secrets a secret and go to jail, temporal criminal punishment, or get kicked out of the church and face eternal damnation. Eternal damnation is a consequence they made up in their head. It's not real. They just made that one up. No one should be taking that seriously. This idea that, listen, we have two options. Go to jail because we love predators, or, get a slap on the wrist from the Pope. Who cares? And they're like, we can't get eternal damnation. We got to protect the predators. That is honestly, I'm not even making this up. This is what their argument boils down to. And they're using coded language again because they know if they just come right out and say, we got to protect the secrets of sex predators, these are our people. They know that looks bad, but that is what they are arguing. They think their only two options are go to jail or be tortured for eternity, and they made up the second one. Like, the heart of the lawsuit says priests are being treated worse than everyone else, but like I told you already, that's a lie. Clergy members are not singled out. They say clergy members were listed specifically in the bill, and that's true, but they were only mentioned in the bill because they were the ones who were exempt in the past, and you have to take them off the list now. So anyway, if anything, like I said, priests still get off lightly. I also wanted to show you one other thing in this lawsuit, because I was just shocked by how much they were citing this. Look at all the religious language they use in this lawsuit. Look at line 11 here, section 47. They're trying to explain how protecting predators is really a big deal for them. As taught by the Roman Catholic Church, Jesus Christ, the eternal Son of God, became incarnate and was crucified on the cross as an atonement for man's sins. Through baptism, I don't care, I'm not giving you a Sunday school lesson, but this goes on for a while where they just talk about their fictional story going on for a while. And they're like, see, everybody, did you read our little Sunday school lesson here? And that's why we have to protect child sex predators. Again, if you read between the lines and go past the, what are you saying about baptism does not, however, eradicate the temporal consequences of sin, all these Catholics are doing is saying predators deserve to not go to jail. Unbelievable. If my religion told me it was more important, let me show you this last section right here. Look at line 55. Priests are obligated to defend the sacramental seal, if necessary, Latin, through the shedding of blood. These priests would rather die than confess to a cop that, oh, by the way, a child sex predator came into my booth and he's totally going to abuse a child again. We would rather die and shed our blood than allow that predator to not go after a kid again. Like, if your religion taught you you should die instead of giving up a child sex predator, like, maybe ditch that religion. It's not a good religion. Again, this is not a complicated dilemma. This is very clear cut. And I don't understand why they think secular courts should take their religious mythology seriously. I know that precedent under the Supreme Court right now is if you sincerely believe something, we have to take that into account. I believe that Catholic priests very seriously take the act of confession, but I don't think that should be an excuse to let a sex predator keep getting away with it. And it is appalling to me that these Catholic bishops say, no, the predators deserve to go on molesting kids because it's not our job to stop it, even though we know it's happening. So this lawsuit was filed on behalf of the bishops by Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, one of those right-wing legal groups, and First Liberty Institute, another conservative religious group, along with another law firm, Wilmer Hale, which is like an actual big white-collar law firm. I'm surprised they're getting involved in this. But I don't think it helps when they make statements about this case, because the things they are saying in it is kind of the way they're defending this lawsuit is kind of insane. Check this out. This is from the guy running Becket, Mark Rienzi. Washington's law isn't about protecting kids. It's about jailing priests for following the church's ancient faith practices. No, my dude, it is 100% about protecting kids, and no one cares about your ancient faith practices. No one wants to jail priests, by the way, either. This is not about jailing priests. I don't want priests to go to jail. I just wish they had some ethical backbone to say maybe we should protect children for once. We are asking the court to step in and stop the state from turning a sanctuary for the soul into a tool of surveillance. Because if there's one thing conservatives hate, the ones who just signed a contract with Palantir to spy on everybody and who want an autism database, it's they don't like surveillance. Anyway, no one's surveilling these confession booths. Like I said, even if someone did confess to this stuff in a confession booth, it's very hard to know that a priest heard this confession and did not act on it and then prosecuting the priest. It's very hard to get this done. I don't necessarily know if this law will accomplish what they hope it'll accomplish, even though I think it's the right thing to do. But the way these defenders are going about it is ridiculous. I will give props to the governor of Washington, Bob Ferguson. This is his response to the lawsuit. I'm disappointed my church is filing a federal lawsuit to protect individuals who abuse kids. That's it. You don't have to say any more. That's your mic drop statement right there. And you're right. That's how we should all talk about it. The Catholic Church wants to protect child predators. That's it. That's the end of the story. They're going to court because they would rather protect predators than protect children. Anyway, I think I'll stop there. What questions do we have for this story? Morality is doing what is right regardless of what you were told. Religion is doing what you were told regardless of what is right. A beautifully put statement. Thank you for sharing that. Aren't there scriptures acknowledging a difference between God's law and man's law, and like, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and God what is God? Yeah, but these people haven't read the Bible, you see, so it's hard to use it against them. Catholic Church, secrets are greater than children. That is correct. That's what they're suing the state to defend. Unbelievable. So reporting child sexual abuse gets you eternal damnation. What kind of religion is this? One that's been in the news for at least 25 years for defending child sex abuse and protecting predators. I mean, this is not a surprise. This is what the Catholic Church does. All right, we are good. Let's go to last call. These are tweets I may have made over the last week that I've totally forgotten about, but Den is going to remind me. And he also said it's a special edition, and I don't know what that means. Oh, special Pride edition. Okay, excellent. What are we talking about here? What have I forgotten I tweeted about? Okay, let's talk about this story. This is incredible. Michael Tate. I didn't write about this, so I didn't talk about it here. There is a Christian band. What's the Newsboys? Is that what it is? I can't remember the name of the band. But this is the band that sang the theme song to God's Not Dead, right? God's not dead. He's really alive. It's not a good song. But the band's been around for a couple decades. And the guy in the center of that picture there, Michael Tate, he is, thank you, Newsboys. He's one of the front men for for that organization. And there have been accusations. I think the Roy's Report is the Christian website that published a very long story, basically accusing this guy of very inappropriate behavior and grooming, and it's disturbing. And I think today the Newsboys put out a formal statement saying, yeah, we're very disturbed by all this. I don't know what happens. I think that guy has stepped down from the band. But this is Mike Cosper, who works for Christianity Today. He did a whole podcast series on the hate preacher Mark Driscoll, saying a story of power, manipulation, and privilege. So often Christians don't report abuse because they worry about their abuser's impact. It just makes things worse. And yeah, how many people did this guy, Michael Tate, abuse who did not want to expose him because he had such a powerful position in that community with his songs and his music? But good for those. I agree with Mike here. Grateful for those with the courage to bring that forward. If you get a chance to read the story on the Roy's Report, it's really disturbing. But yeah. And I'm sorry, I want to go back for a second. What Den just set up there, which is more inexcusable, the action itself or the environment that fostered it? And this is a fair question. Obviously, the action's awful, but you have to wonder what it is about the communities this guy was in and the way he was shielded and the churches his victims may have belonged to that taught them you shouldn't go after this guy for what he did to you. What role did that play in all of this? All right. We talked about this one already with the Sean Feucht story, so we could skip that. This is interesting. This is literally the lieutenant governor of Indiana. And this is what he tweeted. Pride Month alert. The rainbow beast is coming for your kids. This is not some deranged right-wing pastor nutball. This is the lieutenant governor of Indiana. And then he goes on with the warning that goes on for a long time, saying anyone basically celebrating Pride is launching their annual siege on childhood innocence. And this year's Pride Month agenda is more aggressive than ever. Just for what it's worth, it's not. I think a lot of companies have backed off from doing Pride because they're afraid of retaliation from right-wing zealots. But again, I just want to repeat, this is the lieutenant governor of Indiana, but his day job is being a right-wing conservative troll who literally thinks you need to hide your kids, hide your wife from whatever, I don't know, whatever the rainbow is going to do to you. Ridiculous. And then what did this same dude, Micah Beckwith, he said on a podcast, he talked about evolution. Just go ahead and play the clip. This is what he said about evolution.
Evolution says we're supposed to get better.
Yeah.
We're not getting better. We're dying.
And if we're just animals, then, we shouldn't be sad when somebody dies because it's just the way of life. It's just
the curse.
It means more for us and less for them because they were too weak. They died off.
So Dollar Store Seth MacFarlane over there says evolution acceptors shouldn't be sad when someone dies because what? We have no empathy because we think it's survival of the fittest and that's how evolution works. Like literally the people who speak out against evolution, every time they talk about it, this is true of Ken Ham, this is true of all the creationists too, they show you that they don't understand the first thing about evolution. Oh, I love this dude. This is a right-wing Theo Bro Baptist preacher who says, if seeing two men kissing or holding hands makes you want to gag, you're not homophobic. You're a normal person. Don't let them numb your conscience. And listen, I go out sometimes in public. Do I see people doing PDAs? Yes. What do? I move on with my life because who cares? It's not my business. I don't really want to stare. It's kind of creepy. But honestly, if I see any two people holding hands, why would that bother you? Why would that make you want to gag to see any two people holding hands? Like, these are the things these people are worried about. When I see what like liberals in my progressive circles are worried about, it's, oh no, a lot of very vulnerable people are about to lose their health care. When you ask conservative Christians what's keeping them up at night, this guy can't think of anything else except what two men do when they're together. It's the only thing he thinks about. Unbelievable. Like at that point, he's the problem. Yeah, the Associated Press pointed out the Congressional Budget Office says nearly 11 million people will be uninsured a decade from now because of this bill that Republicans are trying to pass. And as this sarcastic remark points out, yeah, this seems bad, but it is a small price to pay to prevent 3 trans people from playing JV high school girls field hockey. Because again, what do Republicans act like is the biggest deal? I saw this in my own neighborhood. I live in the western suburbs of Chicago, and in a neighboring school district, one of the big local kerfuffles is that there was a middle school trans student who won a track meet. Who cares? But if you go to the recent school board meeting in that district, you had all these people who are like, we need to defund this entire district until you ban trans kids from playing a sport where no one was even paying attention until these Republicans got involved. These people they always say, like, we want to protect women's sports. They don't know a damn thing about women's sports. And every time you see women's sports on TV, they're the first people in line making fun of it. Like, you show them a WNBA game, they're like, this isn't real basketball. But they always are like, we got to get trans people out of sports because, you got to protect women's sports. Like, just unbelievable what their priorities are. Because again, what motivates conservatives? It's hurting people they don't like. That's all that they think about constantly. What is this one? Oh, yeah, this is interesting. I didn't know this, but the new Jets head coach, Aaron Glenn, has apparently introduced Bible study as part of his training with the players. And you have a glimpse. He included a picture of this Bible training. And I didn't personally verify this up here, but Freedom from Religion Foundation points out, wow, football and Christianity, what a groundbreaking combo. No one's ever tried that before. The Jets are famously bad, by the way. They're not usually a good team. Okay, we can revisit this very video if they end up doing well next season. But the idea that Christianity is what's going to fix the team is kind of ridiculous. And if you read this, if you zoom in on any of that, it's like what you would give a first grader in Sunday school. If this is the way you're educating the adult New York Jets on Bibles, I don't know. One, it's condescending, but two, I don't know how this helps them with anything. It doesn't help them with football, but it doesn't help them with life in any meaningful way. It's literally Bible trivia that they're asking about. So I don't know what they're doing. For what it's worth, it's not illegal. The NFL is a private organization. They could have a giant sermon before every game if they wanted to. And there's nothing wrong with that compared to, say, public universities and their football teams, which should not be doing this. But again, this isn't a church state thing. This is just the Jets are dumb. That's what this story is. All right, this is... So Michael Flynn, the right-wing conspiracy theorist, said, good morning and happy Sunday. No quotes today. Just wanted to post how I feel about Pride Month. And he showed that clip from, I believe, Parks and Rec. And the actor in that thing tossing out a pride flag is Nick Offerman, who responds that his character was best man at a gay wedding. You dumb person. Nick Offerman, fantastic dude. Love every time he does interviews. He's just a good dude. Did you see The Last of Us, the one episode with Nick Offerman? It was beautiful. And that's his wife, Megan Mullally. She's great too. What else we got? This is unbelievable. Okay, Rebecca Black. You remember her. Friday, gotta get down on Friday. You remember Rebecca Black from back in the day. I didn't know she was singing again, but apparently she is. And she performed at a festival last weekend. And this is one of the costumes she wore. Like, this is how you know she's better than Katy Perry right now. She is wearing this costume, which is mocking those college campus preachers and their crazy signs telling you why you're going to hell because you committed the following sins. And Rebecca Black is wearing this fake campus preacher costume that says sex, keep it holy, one woman, 3 non-binaries, which is a reference to her backup dancers behind her. And that's a picture. There is video of this on Reddit if you want to check it out. She's wearing stuff underneath for what it's worth. But I wasn't expecting that sign. That's unbelievable. I wasn't expecting that sign to come. Like Chapel Roan, I would get it. I wasn't expecting it from Rebecca Black. So kudos to her. That is fantastic. And I kind of love this story arc for her. No, you are going to like her, and you're going to buy her music now, too. You're going to love her. She's your favorite person now. All right. I think that is it. Thank you for sticking around. I should be back next Thursday as well. Thank you, Den, for making my life easier with all of this. And just a reminder to all of you that you can go to patreon.com/Hemant to support what I'm doing. And if you don't want to give that way, you can just subscribe to my newsletter at friendlyatheist.com. Have a wonderful weekend. Subscribe. There you go. More stories next week. I'll see you later.